How to talk religion without pissing people off. Next on Atheist Viewpoint. Hello and welcome to Atheist Viewpoint. I'm your host, Dennis Horvitz, and sitting beside me is our illustrious Director of Public Relations, Dave Muscato. Thank you again for joining us.
Yeah.
When I introduced the show, I said how to talk religion without pissing people off. And of course, many people in our audience are sitting there saying, but I like to piss people off. Well, you can't always do that. And actually, there are ways to debate correctly, and if we want to be taken seriously, that's the best way to do it. One reason why you're on the show today is because you have a series of programs that you want to introduce.
Right. Well, we're starting a new set of workshops at American Atheists on our YouTube channel, and basically the way this works, they are free streaming, online, interactive, live workshops that you can tune into just on your computer. You just go to YouTube. And using Twitter or Facebook, you can send us your questions during the show, and we'll answer them during the show.
Well, I think it's important now because over the past several years, the movement itself is gaining movement, is gaining a lot of momentum, and as our president, Dave Silverman, has said many times, the whole idea is to normalize being an atheist. But we've got to get out there and we've got to get into the discussion. And there are ways to do this. And I know myself from having been on the internet, I've seen atheists making the same mistakes and pitfalls that people who try to defend their religious points of view make, and wind up getting themselves backed into corners that they don't need to be in. So one of the goals of this workshop, why don't you tell us actually
Sure.
what they are specifically?
So what we're going to be talking about today, this workshop about how to talk religion without pissing people off, we actually already did this workshop, and it's on YouTube right now. The way the software works, after the live one, YouTube posts it as a recorded video, so you can go back and watch it. So if you go to YouTube and you search for how to talk religion without pissing people off, it'll pop up. But yeah, I mean, there are certain things that you can do that make your discussions about religion more effective and more efficient. I want to say, we were talking earlier about the idea of intentionally not pissing people off, and if you want to be, quote unquote, taken seriously, you have to do that. Right. I want to say there are reasons that you might want to do that, and I mean, pathos, being passionate about it, is part of effective debate. And,
right. And that doesn't mean not being provocative.
Right. It doesn't mean not being provocative. We're absolutely confrontational at American Atheists. We are not going soft. We're not going accommodations.
Right.
That's not what this is about.
Right.
This is about understanding why and how in the brain people get upset, how and why people get emotional when they're talking about religion, so that you can do this intentionally, or if you want to, and you can avoid doing it when you don't want to, rather than accidentally upsetting people.
Right.
So that's what this workshop that we did is about. We're going to kind of just kind of summarize it, kind of walk through it today, so that you'll have an understanding of what these are going to be like, and then you can go to the YouTube channel if you want to watch the entire thing.
Well, in any case, in your PowerPoint presentation and on YouTube, you cover 6 definitions, and we don't have time to go into them all, but perhaps you should make the distinction, say, between, first of all, we can rule out what a quarrel is. A quarrel is not an argument in the
right. Well, this argument has a very specific definition of
Right.
what we're talking about. It's a series of premises followed by a conclusion. It's a term in logic, as opposed to a discussion, which is much more loosely informal. And that's really what this workshop is about: is discussing religion, not officially structured debates with an audience and a moderator. And all
Right,
that.
because the chances are you're going to have the chances are greater that that if you discuss it at all, it's going to be with someone who has had no formal debate training.
Right,
and
there's a friend or a coworker,
Right.
whatever. Yeah,
and to elucidate the position as much as it is to convince anyone. I think.
Right, and we will be doing a future workshop on formal debates, but this one is about just informal discussion.
And just want to mention also that, as we said, you can go to this on YouTube, and we just don't have enough time to go into the entire. Well, it takes actually on YouTube it's 2 hours and 45 minutes.
Yeah, this was our first one, and
Right.
we were still figuring out. There were a couple technical things, and it went very long. The Q&A went very long, but yeah, the video on YouTube is 2 hours and 45 minutes or so. In the future, they'll be much closer to an hour.
Okay, so now in your outline of informal debates and discussions, you mention we have a whole list of about 10 items of what to do and what not to do, including be patient and be kind and to think of them as a partner, not an opponent. But last week's show we were discussing Ray Comfort and his ambush interviews, and the reason I mention that is because I'm seeing on this list where you say don't let them machine gun.
Mm-hmm. So machine gunning is a term that I use, and I don't know if this is original to me or not, but for basically switching from one argument to another argument right at the point where you've been shown incorrect about something and it's time for you to concede
Right.
that point. So really what should happen is when somebody explains to you why you were wrong about something and shows you the evidence, and if you're really all about getting to the bottom of something and the truth behind something, the logical next step is to say, oh, thank you for correcting me. I understand now. I was wrong. I won't ever use that argument again with anyone because I understand that it's not a good
Right,
one.
right.
But what often happens in religious discussions is right before you get to that point, the religious person will just say, okay, well, what about the fact that something can't come from nothing, when just 2 seconds ago they were talking about a completely different line of reasoning.
Or the classic, why are you so angry?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, right, that's just another reason, an attack on atheism, that as though that has anything to do with whether God exists or not.
Right, but the thing is, you have listed here, if they use a term, ask them what they understand it to mean and to justify why. But of course, you realize that if they start discussing what they mean by the word God, that basically could easily take up the entire discussion.
Sure,
because that's that's part of I think that's part of the whole misunderstanding anyway.
Right, and I mean having a good understanding of what you're trying to say exists or doesn't exist is necessary before you can really get into this discussion. If you don't have a shared understanding of what you're talking about, then you're not going to be able to convince anyone of anything.
And the thing that I think illustrates that is because you and I were just talking, I think the other day, or maybe it was yesterday, about the term agnostic.
Yes,
as opposed to agnostic.
Right.
And the agnostic position is that since you can't define the term God, we can't address it.
Right, that there are just so many definitions of the word God, it's just not agreed upon enough to have any clear coherence that makes it worth saying that I believe in this or I'm not convinced that this exists.
Right, and so I think how that definition applies to this case is, and as we said the other day, that basically when theists and atheists have discussions, the one thing they agree to disagree upon is the idea of agency.
Right.
So I think that might be a good way as to how to define God, so that you're not, that you're not bogged down in defining God for the rest of the discussion.
Right, and I mean, well, I hate to say it depends because then
right.
we get
No,
into
of
discussing
course,
it too.
right.
But you don't have to be a metaphysical naturalist to be an
Right.
atheist. Although I think it's fair to say that pretty much every atheist, at least in our culture and in the United States, is a metaphysical naturalist as well. But right, we don't believe that there's any kind of agency behind things that happen. It's not like there's, everything happens for a reason. We don't believe that. Right. Or, that the universe was created with some intelligent intent behind it. It just happened. It's the same thing with why life is here. It's because chemicals were following the laws of physics, and that's just what happened.
Okay, I want to move on, but
okay.
But one more thing I'd like to touch upon is where you mentioned offer further resources and get their contact information.
Right. So a discussion, the way I talk about it in this workshop, it's not a one-time thing necessarily. Right. You're not going to change somebody's mind or their thinking in an hour or in an afternoon. You have to keep it going. I'm in several...
I was going to mention that. You've got several...
several ongoing email discussions with people who have asked me questions, and then they read it and my response, and then a week later they email me again with more questions, and this can go on, for months, and that's just how it works. People sometimes, often, I will say, convert to a religion in a single emotional instant, but people generally don't leave religion that way. Usually it's a very long process, sometimes years of reading and watching YouTube videos and talking to atheists, and that's part of the process.
I have to tell you that I've seen several samples of your discussion on Facebook, and you basically are very patient, which I think is great. Probably more patient than I would necessarily be. Now, you have a page here devoted to discussion advice, and again, we don't have time to go into all of them, but one thing I think, of course, is very important is don't bring up an argument unless you know it pretty well.
Well, I mean, that's just good advice, I think, for whenever you're trying to debate about anything. But, I mean, obviously, if your discussion partner, I don't want to say opponent because it's not a debate, right. But if your discussion partner brings up evolutionary biology or cosmology or something that you don't really know much about at all, right. It's okay to say, I don't really know anything about that. Let's find somebody, a professor, somebody who can answer those questions. It doesn't mean God did it just because I can't answer your question.
And I think one thing that's very important for, atheists or anyone who is taking, say, the scientific side of a discussion is I don't know is a perfectly legitimate answer.
Right. That's something that a lot of religionists just have a real problem with saying is they want an answer even if it's wrong, even if it's demonstrably wrong.
Well, not only that, but they will use your ignorance of a specific thing as evidence that you can't defend a position or that you're wrong. Not so much that you can't.
Or not just that you're wrong, but that God did it. That's just a fallacy.
Right.
But the other main thing I want to talk about under this discussion advice part of the workshop is ask lots of questions.
Yes.
So you should be listening most of the time. The idea is really to let your discussion partner talk themselves out of belief, and just you ask nudging questions every once in a while to keep it going in the right direction.
And asking lots of questions is kind of a flattering thing. So you're you're doing the kind of the polite, nice thing at the same time.
But there's one way to point out a fallacy where you tell them that's fallacious and here's why. And there's the other one where you can say, well, isn't that fallacious, or doesn't that not make sense because of blah, 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 and you just frame it as a question. And that way it lets them kind of talk you through it. And once they start doing that, often they'll realize, actually that doesn't really make sense.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with conceding when your partner makes a point. If they're right, they're right.
Sure, and that it doesn't matter who makes the point.
Right.
If it's correct, that's the bottom line.
We don't own the truth.
Right.
Right. Okay. So I want to apologize because I'm rushing. We'll have to rush through this, but I think that what we want to do is give you a taste, basically, of what this particular discussion is about, and kind of an idea of what's coming up.
And again, if you want more of this type of stuff, much more detail on each of these, you can just go to our YouTube channel and watch the entire workshop.
Right. And again, there are things. I'm just going to run this down very quickly. One of the sections is understanding belief, belief versus knowledge. Why does something happen? Not what.
Yeah, well, that why not what is one that comes up a lot, and this is just a fallacy also. It's a straw man where they change the question when they're answering based differently from what you asked them. Yeah. And I mean, often when you say to somebody, well, why do you believe that Jesus rose from the dead? And they'll say, well, I believe that Jesus rose, and I mean, they won't give you a because answer. They'll just tell you more about, well, Christianity says that this. And it's like, that's not, I'm not asking you what you believe. I know what you believe because I'm familiar with Christianity. I'm asking you why you think that's true. And that's something that often comes up, and it's just something to watch for.
Right. And I've known from personal experience that, for instance, sooner or later, they always play the faith card.
Right. And actually, Richard Dawkins, I believe this was in The God Delusion, said that eventually every single argument for religion comes to faith. I mean, that's just, when you exhaust everything else, you're going to end up there. Absolutely.
Because, I mean, I have defined religion as, of course, obviously a generalization, but I've just defined religion as absolutism followed by excuses. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter how liberal your religion is or how liberally you interpret your religion. At some point, for it to have any validation at all, you've got to have the absolutist basis that there is a God, that there's agency.
Right.
And
I think a major difference here is just that often religionists will erroneously confuse belief and knowledge as though they're synonyms, and they are not synonyms. Belief is a necessary condition of knowledge, but it's not a sufficient condition of knowledge. And I actually will be doing another entire workshop about epistemology where I cover what makes up knowledge and the difference between knowledge and faith and empiricism and so on. But if you're having a discussion with somebody, that's something to watch for, is where they say, well, they say something as a fact-based statement when it's in fact really just what they believe. So if they say, like, well, I know for, just like you ask them what about their religion, they say, well, I know as one thing that Jesus loves me or something like that, or that Jesus can save you from hell. And you say, well, that's not something you know, even though you're telling me that you know that. That's just something that you believe because that's your religion. And there's a big difference there, because a belief is something that could change or that you could be wrong about.
Right. And again, to just kind of move on, but just to again give you a little bit of what of the other items in the list under understanding belief. You're talking in practice, religionists often defend deism, which I guess is sort of kind of the idea of ultimately you're going to that single absolute.
Right. And this just comes up all the time. You'll have a discussion with somebody about why they believe their religion, and they'll start telling you, like, for example, they're a Christian or a Muslim or something, and they'll start telling you that, well, something could not have come from nothing. Right. That's an argument for deism. That is not an argument for your particular religion.
Right.
And if you're trying to get to the bottom of why they believe what they believe, you have to get them to justify their belief in specific things. So if they believe in baptism, that you have to be fully submerged or something, start asking them about that. Say, why do you believe they have to be fully submerged? Is that necessary? Like, how do you know that this is true? Is that not just something that you arbitrarily believe in? And if you could be wrong about that, how many other things could you be wrong about?
Absolutely. And I also want to jump, because again, when we were discussing the show before, you mentioned that you emphasized that one of the most important things about this whole the whole discussion situation is the idea of blasphemy.
Right, and I would say this is really the thesis of the whole thing. It's that atheists do not have this concept of blasphemy. It's not something that we deal with as atheists. But with religionists, they have this idea that you can offend some agency, and that upsets them when this happens. And it's explicitly forbidden, at least in the Abrahamic religions, probably most religions. But I would say that's really the main distinction between religious people and non-religious people.
Right. Well, the thing is, too, and again, I'm not a trained psychologist, but when you offend someone's deity, or they perceive their deity as being offended, what you're really doing is threatening their Weltanschauung, their worldview, and their self-identity, in which they have a tremendous emotional investment.
Right.
And you're basically, because, let's face it, if no matter how nicely we do it, by our non-belief in God, we're basically saying to lots of people, the things that you hold the most dear, the very basis for meaning in your life, isn't real.
Right.
And it's understandable that people are going to get upset about that.
Right, and it's really just a matter, and I talk about this in much more detail in the workshop, but it's really a matter of taking on an identity with this stuff.
Yes.
It's not just that you believe these things. It's that it's not just that you believe Christianity. It's that you are a Christian.
Yes.
When somebody starts attacking Christianity, it feels like they're attacking you because they are attacking you if you're talking about your identity.
Yes. And how can you, and unless you're just so, I can certainly in the Abrahamic faiths and Western faith, I can't imagine having believing in a religion and not having your sense of self completely invested in it or mostly invested in it.
Right, I completely agree, and that's really, I would say, one of the first major steps toward becoming an atheist for anybody who used to be religious is that paradigm shift in your thinking of starting to see not your religion is true and all other religions are myth, but your religion is what you believe, and other people believe other things. And you could be wrong, and it's just one of many.
I'm sure you are aware of that very famous saying now that's on the internet. It was attributed to somebody, I guess, a techie by the name of Stephen Roberts.
Yeah.
I contend that we are both atheists. Yeah, I just believe in one less God than you do. When you understand the reasons why you dismiss all other gods, and you will understand the reason why I dismiss yours. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very valid. I think that's a valid position.
It's a great quote. It really sums up the entire thing.
And continuing on to this on this vein of blasphemy. And I'm sure this is no surprise to anybody who accepts science as the best explanation for the natural world. There, of course, is a biochemical basis for why we get upset when our belief systems are threatened.
Right, and I spend a great deal of time in the video talking about this part of it, the blasphemy and the brain. Basically, it just from a neuroscience perspective, what is actually happening in your brain as far as the signals that come in and what happens as far as the different parts of your brain that are activated when you get upset talking about something. It's actually the same, it's called amygdala hijacking, and I talk about what that is, but it's the same effect, the fight or flight response when you're being attacked. That it is a metaphor, but it's the same exact thing when you're being attacked or you are feeling threatened that you're going to be attacked from a shark or something like that. It's the same thing that happens in your brain when somebody attacks your identity, as far as what goes on.
I guess it's kind of the fight or flight response.
Right. That's exactly what happens.
So, and anyway, we go in the program. You go on again to do a much more detailed version of amygdala attacking, and but what is this? What do you mean that the key word? What you ask? What does blasphemy look like? And in this page here, you start off with, you say the key word is sheltered. What do you mean by that?
So I spent some time in the presentation in the workshop talking about desensitization and some research in the 1950s about clinically treating phobias and how you can desensitize yourself to irrational reactions like that. So basically, when you have somebody who's been sheltered from being desensitized by not being exposed to certain ideas, you have, I'll just use Christians as an example. They have their own daycares, they have their own private schools, they have their own textbook publishers, they have their own colleges, they have their own TV networks, they have their own radio, stations and genres of music. They have their own hospitals, they have their own retirement homes. You can go
the Amish, their own religious community.
Sure, right. You can go your entire life as a Christian without really ever interacting with someone who isn't a Christian.
Right.
And what that means is the first time that you have an interaction with somebody who isn't a Christian, it's really going to upset you to see something like a tattoo or to see something, like a body piercing or things like that.
Right.
Just because you're not used to it. And you can desensitize yourself by exposing yourself to these things. And the main point that I make in the presentation is that atheists are desensitized to these things. So when we start talking about religion in a very critical way, it doesn't upset us because we're used to it, but it could really upset them if they're not used to hearing it. So you have to just be aware of that and not go over them like that.
I've often felt, and people, other atheists have expressed the same sentiment to me, is that, and maybe I'm being, maybe this is a specious assumption, I don't know, but I get the feeling that as you say on the list, that just the word atheist triggers a response. I get the sense that in many cases there's this response because on some level they're afraid that we're correct.
Well, just having been made aware of atheism is a threat to who they are.
Right.
So yeah, it's just something to be aware of.
Right. In any case, we're running out of time, but I just want to basically, why don't we just have a discussion wrap up, which you can also find on YouTube. Blasphemy means different things to different people. You covered the cause amygdala hijacking in the discussion.
Yeah, I mean, to cause amygdala hijacking, basically you challenge your partner.
Yes.
And if you want to avoid it, you do the same thing that you would use to desensitize someone to a phobia. You use these baby steps of exposure to what you're talking about.
Right. Is it a good tool to point out the areas where you agree, and then indicate how that proves your own point, your own position?
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there are all sorts of different things that you can use, different techniques, and to help make your point and get that across, and help
in
have
any case,
productive conversation.
I'm sorry to cut you off. We are running out of time. Again, you can find this discussion on YouTube, and it is a series of American Atheists discussions, basically how to have discussions and on YouTube. It's online, it's interactive, it's free streaming, and we are coming to the end of the show. You have been watching Atheist Viewpoint. We have been talking to our Director of Public Relations, Dave Muscato. I've been your host, Dennis Horvitz. Remember, it's Atheist Viewpoint, where reason reigns and reality rules. We will see you next week.
Knock, knock, and the sound from my door. You with a message from the Lord. Jesus loves you, yes I'm sure, but I'm not falling anymore. You're trying to save my soul with your washed out eyes, offering me real estate up in the skies. Don't be offended by a word to the wise, but I'm not falling anymore. I've read your Bible and read it well. I've heard all the stories the preachers tell. What kind of saints would create a hell? I'm not falling anymore. Can't you get free from the jail inside? You sold your own mind for a place to hide. Break your slave chains and cast them aside. Freedom's knocking at your door. Half of the world is starved and ill. Their bellies go empty while your coffers fill. Our land is bleeding and the wounds won't heal, and I'm not falling anymore. You quit burning witches long ago. The Inquisition is over, I know. The Pope's even pardoned Galileo, but I'm not falling anymore. Can't you get free from the jail inside? You sold your own mind for a place to hide. Break your slave chains and cast them aside. Freedom's knocking at your door. The look on your face shows a withered brain. Religion has driven you insane. Some want money, you want pain, but I'm not falling anymore. You ask if I'm happy, yes I am. I think for myself, I've learned to stand. Kneel if you want, I don't give a damn, but I'm not praying anymore. Can't you get free from the jail inside? You sold your own mind for a place to hide. Break your slave chains and cast them aside. Freedom's knocking at your door. your cell. You disdain life and you're scared of hell. They've indoctrinated you quite well, but we're not falling anymore. Can't you get free from the jail inside? You sold your own mind